Ken, I'm fascinated by the subject of calling. You've been working in the world of finance for almost 40 years. Like, how did that come about?
Well, important question, calling, and I think it is worth dealing with the subject that so many people say, well, how do I know what I'm called to do? So I think it's good to be able to have this conversation. From my point of view, what happened was I finished university and I needed a job. I needed money. And I weighed up two different options. One was in insurance and one was in banking. And I wasn't sure which way to go. I remember saying to myself that psalm, commit your way unto the Lord, trust in God, and he will act. And I did that every day, trying to weigh up. And it is a weighing up. I made little lists, this is what investment banking might look like, this is what insurance might look like. But in the end, to be honest, I didn't know very clearly. There wasn't a sense of just, calling, this is it.
Yeah.
Which I think is often the case, that we do as best we can, we sense the nudges. And I suppose a friend of mine talked to me. He was involved in the bank in which I eventually started working. And it was just that nudge that kind of said, look, this is the place. This is the way. Walk in it. Sometimes you hear a small voice, as Isaiah says, this is the way. Walk in it. Doesn't mean to say if you don't walk in it, it's going to be the end of everything. So I sensed that finished university, needed some money, needed a job. I'm afraid it is as simple as that, and started working.
The language of calling often makes people think that there must have been something dramatic, a bit of lightning, an audible voice, heavens open. But for you, it sounds then it's much more natural. It was making decisions, getting the counsel of friends, and then weighing it all up, and eventually you ended up in the work that you did.
Yeah, I think that for some people there is a distinctive calling.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete, you're a mathematician, weren't you?
Well, yeah, studied maths and philosophy, yeah.
Well, I studied philosophy, but as I couldn't factorise, I had to give up maths. But were you always going to want to be?
No, at university I had no idea, and eventually, I think for me, calling, it's easier to make sense of it retrospectively. Looking backward, the dots connect, but at the time, just trying to make decisions as I move forward. Now, I know you're passionate about mentoring. You give a lot of time to raising up leaders. And a question you must get a lot is, I'm making a decision about a career path. I just don't know what to do. Like, I feel a level of paralysis. There's all these options. What do I do? What kind of counsel do you give to people in those moments?
This is the way I would look at it. The first is, there's a wonderful song sung by a great friend of mine called Will Reagan of United Pursuits. Talks about finding your own flame. And he's got a line in it which says, you can't live someone else's passion.
Yeah.
And that's sort of fundamental. And after all, some of these decisions are made in your early 20s, when there's not a huge amount of experience around. So that finding your own flame is very important. And the Spirit of God, of course, is there to enable us to understand that. But Paul is so helpful in Colossians when he says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. And that, of course, is the great piece, because it's so liberating, it's so freeing. It's whatever you do. It's not some God that comes and forces you down some narrow path, says you've got to stick in this little narrow gauge that I sort of want for you, this train track from which there's no escape, whatever your skills or circumstances. No, he's a freeing God that enables us with freedom to react and to interlink with him, just as you would with a father and a son, or a father and a daughter.
So we've looked at this idea of like passion, essentially desire. Some Christians get nervous about desire, thinking, when it comes to discerning a call, I shouldn't listen to desires. But it seems like you're saying that actually, a lot of our desires are God-given. If you're desiring to pursue music industry, if you're desiring to become a teacher, you've got to listen seriously to that voice within.
Well, but if the desires don't come from him, who do they come from? I mean, the promise is that he'll give you the desires of your heart.
Yeah.
Clearly, what we want to do is to align our desires with his, so that when we look at our gifting and our calling, the two run together. That's what the Spirit does. The workplace is changing rapidly.
Yeah.
And therefore we need to reassess just what it means to be called into the workplace? And is there a pecking order? Which is sometimes the question, is one job better than another?
Yeah. Is being a vicar better than being an investment banker?
Well, what do you
Am I
think,
more spiritual than you?
Well, you're certainly more spiritual than I am. That goes without saying. But it is an important point, because actually there is no distinction between the sacred, if I may call you sacred,
you're the first one to have done that,
and the secular, which is me. There's no distinction in God's eyes between what He calls us to do, because He has got a wide range of callings for people to do, for the simple reason that if He didn't, the entire world would seize up. If you didn't have engineers, doctors, lawyers, people who work to make things, we couldn't run a modern economy. So God has got a spread. I love the description, which I was just writing down, of just the number of different people that did different things. Abraham was a cattle trader. Joseph was Prime Minister of Israel, and later he sort of dabbled in wheat futures, derivative market. Luke was a doctor. The first Ethiopian convert was a central banker. Dorcas was in fashion. Simon the tanner, I suppose, the first Louis Vuitton of his day, and Jesus was a carpenter. I mean, there are a range of different professions, and when we look at them as to these different callings, I think all of them have one thing in common, which is that our religion is not something that is detached, that exists in the clouds somewhere. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great German pastor who was murdered by the Nazis, he had this simple phrase, said that Christians are this worldly, by which he meant that we are engaged in the world. We recognize this is the world that God has made. So He is Lord, meaning He's in control of the whole world, so that the Lord of the money market is also the Lord of mercy. The Lord of profit is the Lord of prayer. The Lord of commerce is the Lord of compassion. There's one, completely indivisible Lord. It sounds as if I'm preaching. You ought to take it off. But you know what I mean? There is one. He threads his way through every aspect of our lives.
So if I rewind to the last 20 years since we've known each other, really, I know there's been key moments where I've come to you for advice, making big decisions about the future, and you've really spoken into my life, but I know you've spoken of 5 C's that sometimes you help people through just making these key decisions. Talk us through that, because I mean it's brilliant bit of wisdom.
I think the first step that is really important is this consideration, Consider, just think about it. What are the facts? What are your gifts? What does the future of this market look like that you want to go into? You want to be a software programmer. Where is it in the right area? Does it fulfill your skills? Just reflect on these things quietly. It's not a great big song and dance.
So you've mentioned number 1, consider. What's number 2?
Clarity. Clarify. It's a very important piece that after we've made these considerations, we need clarity. We need to be able to pull together the things that belong together and separate the issues that are not relevant to a decision that is to be made. This clarification of the key issues is very important, and it helps to actually reduce to very simple questions the issues. Is this my skill set? If so, how do I know this is my skill set? Do I have a sense that God is drawing me in this area? If so, why? Who else is there? Who could I learn from? And so one clarifies both oneself, your own decision, and also what God has in mind. Now, it is very important for all of us to know that calling isn't just something that you immediately know, this is it, I'm called. Some do. Some have heard the audible voice of God. I haven't. But mostly it is a process. Then I think there's the conscience, which Augustine said, it's the silent clamour of the heart. You've got all sorts of things that look clear, and there's something within you saying, do you know, this business is not the right place. The partner that
Yeah.
I'm going to join is a bit shifty.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. So you let conscience play its part.
So consider, you need clarity, your conscience. Number 4?
Courage. Courage. That's the bit that we all need. If I spend time with people like you and others who have been kind enough to come and talk through some of their issues, the little bit in between clarity and courage is the one that causes most of the angst. Leaving clarity, you know, and quite often the issues are very clear, but actually it requires courage. You've got to press the button. You've got to fire the bullet. You have to take some action. And I think that is very important when it comes to the overall calling, because nothing happens while we debate, think, talk, until we have to make the decision. But you can't make a decision if you don't have the courage to do so. We're all weak on courage, and we need each other to help to actually make the steps, to say, right, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to go for this new opportunity. And I love the story of Caleb and Joshua. I mean, do you remember it? Probably preached on it often enough. There were how many of them? 12?
Yeah,
12 of them?
12 of them that go and investigate.
Yeah, 10 guys get it wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, they see giants.
Yeah, they're the ones freaking out. We could never go there.
Yeah.
We'll be overwhelmed.
And then the other 2, I mean, that required courage.
Yeah.
But the courage came from the fact that they had clarified, Joshua and Caleb had clarified the issues in their mind. They saw it differently.
Yeah.
Because clarity is not just to see as everybody else sees, is to see as the Spirit of God shows us. They saw things differently. They saw the opportunity. And then they said...
Caleb was the one that said, we can certainly do this.
Yeah, we can certainly do it.
Yeah.
Because God had revealed to them a different perspective, a different way of looking at it. And that courage was the courage to take the risk and to move into the promised land. Lastly, contentedness. You know, the peace that passes all understanding.
Brilliant. So just walk us through again. So we start with, we consider, we're asking God for clarity, listening to our conscience, you know, developing courage, the guts to do this, and then comes the contentment of just moving into it, knowing God's peace upon us.
And that's the package
it's
for calling that all of us have.
What does the Bible teach about, you know, a good attitude towards our work?
Our attitude towards our work is the attitude that Jesus had towards being here with us. And that is honouring him in whatever we do, in the work that we're doing. And in honouring him, we are buying into the bigger picture that he has for us and that he also has for the world that is around us.
So you've got the big picture, the macro level, but then you zoom in, you've got the day in, day out. How do you keep the big in mind when you're consumed in the details of the day?
I think you start by recognising that is where God wants you to be. I mean, if you're constantly saying, well, I don't want to be here, I don't like being here, then you've got a problem.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say one doesn't change.
Yeah.
There are times when people change career, of course. Yeah. But for the moment, it seems to me it is very important to live in the moment, to live where you are for the purposes of what he's put you there, which is to do a day's work well.
Yeah.
I think also it's quite important for us to recognize that in buying into a bigger picture, we learn from God also to stand back in our particular world. So sometimes it's quite difficult to just work every day and not know why you're working. So take somebody who works in a food supermarket.
Yeah.
You know, it might just appear, well, you know, all I'm doing is I'm working in the checkout or I'm stacking shelves. And on one level you say, well, that's the only thing I've got to test.
Yeah.
But actually, when you see the bigger picture, it is that people need food. Yeah. Supermarkets are an efficient way and good economic way of shifting food from producer to the consumer. Yeah. And there are people in that, in the way in which that is brought from one to another. Yeah. So it is worth taking the broader picture in order to fulfill those desires of knowing, wherever I am, I'm not alone. There are other people around. There's a bigger picture that I need to buy into as to why I'm doing this particular job.
So you start the day with some prayer, reading the FT, reading the Bible. You end the day with some sort of reflection of what's happened and in some prayer. And there's moments where God punctuates the day with just thoughts, or turning attention towards Him.
But let me ask you that then, Peter. I mean, you're a God man, as the world would say. You paid to pray. So what's the going rate to pray?
Well, I think it is the same. Trying to create space, at the beginning of the day. The end of the day, I think, is always a good way of saying, God, thanks for that. And I recognise your hand was at work in this situation. And then finding those moments throughout where God just punctuates the moment and reminds you of something that He's doing and pulls you back on track. Yeah, I think that is a really healthy way of just doing life with constant conversation flowing between you and God.
Well, it's good to just look at the end of this session on that note, that what God has called you to do, God has called me to do, there is no difference. There is no sacred, there is no secular. That He reaches to a wide range of all of us and then gives us the skills to know that there are certain ways that we can follow Him, whatever we do. And equally, we can also know that there is something specific in which He has called us to work in this world. That's very exciting. I mean, I find
it's a liberating vision.
It's
that
confidence.
Essentially, God's in charge. He has a plan, and He's going to bring His plan about. Thank you so much, Ken.
Well, it's
Absolutely
good to talk.
Brilliant.
Good
Thank
to
you.
talk.